this recent interview of Nick Fuentes by Tucker Carlson really sent shockwaves throughout the system.
Why would it send shockwaves? What was so scary about the interview?
Yeah, right. Well, because this loyalty to Israel has become just a fundamental tenet, in conservative orthodoxy, the conservative faith, the official conservative faith is what I should say, what we call conservative Inc., the kind of the think tank conservatism, the conservatism that is supported and supports the Republican Party. This is supposed to be an article of faith. You believe in Israel. You support Israel unconditionally. And if you don't, you're one of those, you're somehow woke, which doesn't make any sense to me. It's a real misapplication of that term. But you are described as woke as being a member of the left and an anti-Semite and all those things. It's not a side issue for them. It's a core issue. And Tucker Carlson and others, Candace, Owens, who have these very large followings within among conservatives, went right after it. They attacked this head on. They didn't just snipe at it or from a distance or go at it indirectly. They took it head on. They've really been very bold, and this is heresy. This is something that has to be condemned. This threatens the, not just the Zionists, but the larger, let's say, again, conservative Inc., the Republican establishment. And so they have responded hysterically, but as we pointed out, people like Mark Levin and Ben Shapiro, just to name a couple. But I think their hysterical responses really have not helped them. I think anybody who's maybe sitting on the fence and listens to that just is going to think, there's something wrong with these people. And, maybe dig further into the criticisms of Israel and Zionism, and of the U.S.-Israeli relationship.
Right. I mean, I guess what kind of surprised a lot of us was just the hysteria at which the Zionists approached the Nick Fuentes interview with Tucker Carlson. But why the hysteria? Is it simply because they don't have an argument? Do they make an argument for Zionism? I think that's what, people would like to be able to hear.
Yeah. They really, no, they don't. That's the thing is at least, I have to say that and sit down and listen to the whole, maybe the whole speech or whatever. But in the case of Mark Levin, I did read his whole tweet, and it was just, kind of a word salad of insults and ad hominem attacks. That's what it was. I mean, it just seemed to be a complete meltdown. But in general, no, they don't. This is something, actually, a point that John Mearsheimer makes very, very effectively. He goes back to when his book came out in the early 2000s, The Israel Lobby, which he co-wrote with Stephen Waltz, the professor from Harvard. He said he was kind of naive. He thought, okay, we're beginning a conversation here, discussion. And he thought that maybe, okay, yeah, people just need to talk about this, which clearly they do. But he thought that there would be well-meaning, honest people, principled people on the other side who would engage them in a debate. And he was all for that. But that's not what happened. They just moved to shut them down, they were smeared as anti-Semites, and anybody who gave them some kind of platform was smeared as an anti-Semite. That's how it was. And he says that basically because if you do have an argument, a real debate about this, the critics of Zionism win and the Zionists lose. It really is an argument that you can't win. If Zionism is an argument that or arguments for Zionism just are going to fail out in the open. So it is necessary to just shut it down. And that's what we're seeing. Now, to explain the hysterical response, well, yeah, okay, this is something you're committed to. Now it's out in the open. And you realize that if you start, really making arguments with people like, Mearsheimer and so forth, not just Nick Fuentes, because, all these people can make very, very good arguments in Zionism, you're going to lose. So you just have to start screaming and hoping that that this genie goes back in the bottle, that the cat goes back in the bag. And of course, that's not what's going to happen. There's another aspect to it, which I think we have to acknowledge as a possibility anyway. And this is something that Tucker Carlson made when he was interviewed by Dave Smith. I believe it was Tucker Carlson, or was it Dave Smith? No, I think it was Tucker. But Dave Smith agreed with him. I think they had the same opinion on this issue. Said that some of these people, including Mark Levine, again, these are people that like Tucker Carlson knows personally, has communicated with personally. He says, that some of these people really believe what they're saying. They're genuinely afraid. They think that there's a Fourth Reich around the corner. They're victims of a kind of paranoia that has been stoked over the years. And he says, there's nothing like that. Again, you look at, I remember the Nick Fuentes interview. He's explaining, like, how did he come to his conclusion? How did he go down this so-called rabbit hole? How did he become an anti-Zionist? And some people would say an anti-Semite. Because he started with an honest question. It's just like, how do we justify, $3.8 billion in annual aid to Israel? And nobody could answer him. Again, going back to John Mearsheimer's point, there really isn't a good answer. He was just told to shut up. And that's what made him keep on going down. Well, it's not that, I guess what I want to say here is that there's not just logic, let's say, that's absent from the Zionist arguments. There's also kind of an unwillingness to acknowledge that they can ever make a mistake, that part of the problem is themselves, that actually is the major part of the problem. It's that their unreasonableness, their insistence on shutting down debate has actually led to the state of affairs that they're now facing. I noticed recently I read some opinion pieces in Haaretz. Now, again, this is the left, of the very left wing of the Israeli spectrum, but they almost sounded like Mark Levine. It was just these are all just Nazis. It's just sort of a completely irrational hatred of the Jews that's coming to the fore. These monsters that we always knew, and they're coming out of the closet, and they must be destroyed. And I was just waiting for some acknowledgement and say, hey, well, wait a second. Maybe you're getting this increasing criticism because of the conduct of Israel itself. Maybe that's actually the source of it. And that wasn't anywhere in there. There's just a refusal to stop and say, wait a second, okay, maybe we've been going about this the wrong way. Perhaps there is some legitimate anger. Maybe there is this legitimate suspicion of our motives. But there's none of that. There's just a refusal to ever reflect on what they're doing and to acknowledge mistakes. It's just, it's just a matter of pointing at the enemy and screaming Nazi. That's where they all go. And this is not going to help. This is what people are looking at that and they say, there's something wrong with you. Wait a second. I just had a simple question. This is what's happening.
Is the plan to just keep screaming Nazi indefinitely? I mean, won't that lose its effect? It already has, I think. Is there another strategy?
Yeah, well, I don't think much more than that. We'll just outright suppression, censorship. Jonathan Greenblatt, the head of the ADL, was interviewed recently, and essentially they said, yeah, we have to do so. This is a serious problem, and we've already made moves. And he referred to, the acquisition of TikTok and, and some, I guess it was CNN. These are, we need to get to gain full control, basically, he was saying, of the media landscape. So, he was talking about censorship. And then the Israeli government has recently come out with a plan to, not only gain control of the U.S. media, but actually to influence AI. ChatGPT in particular. ChatGPT needs to be trained to give the right answers, right in quotation marks, Zionist-friendly answers. This is something that they're working on, and they're spending a lot of money on.
Yeah, no, I saw news reports about that, but it's so wild that we went for so long claiming Russian election interference here, and then you just have a government like Israel openly talking about paying influencers to have a certain opinion about, with the domestic politics here in the United States, that Americans need to have this opinion about this country, and then they're openly investing money into search engines and, like you said, OpenAI and
right.
And it's so open. It's so open.
Yeah. Compare that to, the accusations that were made against Russia. They said that they, spent $100,000 on Facebook ads. It turned out it was something like 40,000 before the election, 60,000 after the election. Some were pro-Trump, some were anti-Trump, some were just about kitties and puppies. I mean, the thing was so silly. And then the so-called Russian government was not the Russian government, but just this, what do you call it? It was a firm that actually was just trying to generate, based in St. Petersburg, if I remember correctly, trying to generate clicks. They were just churning out this clickbait, a lot of which was very, very silly. And that was, this totally bogus, evidence, evidence supposedly for Russian intervention was just, first of all, it was so minor, it was false, it was silly, but it just led to this tremendous hysteria, that was, it was part of the whole Russiagate hoax and the Russiagate hysteria. And now this is major. We're talking about actually, modifying AI and gaining control of major, media platforms and outlets.
Right, the prime minister saying we got to get X, openly. We got to get TikTok.
Right. So where's the hysteria? There should be, some real anger, and it's just when you have some people asking very legitimate questions and pointing to this, we hear the screams: anti-Semites, the Nazis, the Fourth Reich is around the corner.
You think that in this so-called civil war, we would have more and more defectors from the Zionist side over to our side, right? I mean, because if you're stuck defending the indefensible, you're going to lose. You can't win, right? It's inevitable.
It's happening. There are individual stories, people, something that comes out every month or so, and it's representative of a larger trend, a story about a scholar, an author, or whoever who was a Zionist and tried to defend what Israel was doing and then finally said, I can't do this anymore. So it is happening. It is happening.
Yeah. I want somebody that's higher up that knows the inner workings that can tell us about leak the Epstein stuff, do you think that's a possibility that we'll have some real big turn?
Those kind of people generally do not convert. Maybe, again, those are, at the top, we have very political animals, and we don't have people that are, with real consciences. Anyway, that's my impression. But some of those might flip just because they see the writing on the wall. These are political animals, and they say, "Oops," Again, we have the U.S. senators and members of Congress that have, again, rejected AIPAC money, and I think maybe I'm not going to judge them. Maybe in some cases it's a real matter of conscience, but I suspect that it's also they're looking at the shifting political reality here, and there is real anger within their districts. I can't take this money. It's going to hurt me more than it's going to help me. And we may see more and more of those kind of calculations. We will see more and more of those calculations as we go forward.
Right. Well, then I feel like this civil war it's not so much a civil war, because if the truth is on one side and the other side has an indefensible position, it's more that we've just uncovered the lie, right? The lie has been brought out to the open now, and they can't win this. There's nothing they can do, right? I think that was the significance of Nick Fuentes, is this was somebody that was relegated to the dark realms, only on Rumble. He's not even on YouTube, can't use PayPal. He's completely canceled, labeled a horrible anti-Semite. Yet his ideas, his whatever he was saying on Rumble was resonating enough with people that it finally broke free. And he's huge. They killed Charlie Kirk and wanted to get this, that Brillin Hall, whatever, that weird kid in. They got Nick Fuentes is the ascendant person now. That's who they got.
Right.
It's like it. And so you can't cancel these people. You already fired Candace Owens. You got rid of Tucker Carlson. Right. You fired him. So and they got bigger than ever.
Right.
So canceling doesn't work. This isn't a war. Right. It's just an uncovering, an unraveling. Right. It's the great noticing. It's what we called it. Right. Everybody's noticing.
Right. Yeah. No, that's a very good point. You can. Right. The old tactics are not working anymore. And I think part of that is that finally there is this real, I think part of it is the genocide in Gaza. I mean, that has really woken a lot of people up, really disturbed a lot of people and forced them to reassess their own long-held beliefs. That's a big part of it. But then this is happening in a new kind of an entirely different media landscape. The tactics of censorship and suppression that were used in the past just don't work. And you gave some very good examples. We fired Tucker, we fired Candace, and then they're bigger than ever. That, in the past, that wasn't true. These people got fired, like Joseph Sobran from the National Review, for criticizing Israel. And it's not like he completely disappeared, but it was, the megaphone was taken from him, and he continued to write, but he didn't get, nearly the readership that he had beforehand. So he was effectively canceled. But you really can't do that anymore. It's very, very hard for various reasons. I think, again, the anti-Semitism charge is losing its sting because it has so clearly been abused. And then again, you can just find another platform.
Okay,
and if something happens, like there is a wave of censorship on YouTube, let's say the Israelis actually, or somebody who's very pro-Zionist takes control of YouTube and just fires everybody, that is critical of Israel. That could happen. Let's be honest, it could happen. But if that happens, in a major way, then there's just going to be this huge migration to a platform like Rumble, and then Rumble will really take off. We're already seeing some of that, but I think it's only in its initial stages.
Okay, so it's game over then for the Zionists. Am I being too premature in saying that? There's no way that they can. The truth. I'm just saying that the truth is out, though. I think that's why. You can't bottle that back in.
Yeah, again, it's just like they still have a firm control and power. And actually, I think the thing to worry about, is that you have very, very powerful people that are very passionate about this issue, that have a passionate devotion to Israel. And for them, some of them, openly say that's what I'm all about is Israel. And a lot of them are Jews, but not all of them. You even have, Gentiles saying this too, which seems to me particularly crazy. But you hear that. I'm all about Israel. And if it looks like they're really losing their grip on power, we could conceivably see some kind of coup. I mean, I think that's a possibility.
Whoa, really?
Yeah, well, I'm not seeing it anywhere in the immediate future, but just think about it. I mean, you just have this fact. You have these people that are, again, extremely powerful.
Well, actually,
and
isn't it already happened? I mean, really, we didn't really think of, Donald Trump basically is owned by the Zionists. He was talking about ending all these wars and whatnot and reducing military spending, and he comes in, and now we see what he's doing. Yeah, I'll bomb Iran for you. We'll keep on sending you more weapons. Yeah. Come over Netanyahu again and again. It's like, the coup's already there. That's what the government's been since like 1968. Right. We've been
right. You could say that in a way, but we still have, at least on paper, and on the surface, a democracy here, a constitutional republic with regularly held elections. But I guess, there has been this undue influence, going back to the 1960s of this Israel lobby on American politics, no question about it. And it has continued, term after term. It doesn't matter if it's a Democrat or a Republican. It's been there all along. And but I'm talking about something a step forward. Just sort of going from it's still it's influence, but it's not outright control. It's not an actual coup. Where we say we're not going to hold elections this year. And that could actually happen. I mean,
you think Trump could do that? Trump would be like, he's floated the idea of a third term. Do you think that he's like, you know what?
I don't know. I mean, the thing is with Trump, he's just so. I don't think so. I don't think he has the guts to actually go against these people. But I might be wrong.
He's so old too.
Yeah, and he's old. You're right. I think somebody to. Yeah, I
Who knows, though? People get crazy when they're old.
Yeah, right. And he's Trump, so who knows what he can do. I'm going to make no predictions about Trump. We'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, well, it's the craziest story of our time. I think it's a seismic shift for this country. And it's changing so quickly that I think a lot of people haven't even really noticed, that maybe aren't following too closely. But I'm curious what's going to happen to the evangelical Christians here in the U.S. because if so much of their faith has been wrapped around Zionism, and we're saying that Zionism itself is dying, that it's going to lose this war because it's indefensible. And then when people are presented with this, I think what's going to happen, you're going to have a split with the church, within the church. And I think some of the most probably fanatical people that will go attack Israel and Zionism will be those Christian Zionists that maybe felt like they were used, if they were lost, and then you have half that just stays hardcore faithful Zionists. I mean, what's going? It's the biggest.
I don't know. That's
faith
that kind
of this country.
Right.
It's like
right. No, that's going to be a real convulsion that will, again, I'm sure there are individuals, Christian Zionists, that have made this journey away from Christian Zionism, and I hope there are many, many more. I don't know what's happening within that community. I'm sure that they're aware of it, but they're going to be standing with their fellow secular and Jewish Zionists right now.
I've seen many pastors, Baptist pastors as well, speaking out against it. And I feel like those people, when they put their content out there, or they speak when they speak on the subject, because it is the right stance, like we said, Zionism is indefensible. Right. It just automatically resonates with their congregations. Right. It resonates with people online, and it will just start to win out. That's the whole thing we're talking about.
I think, in the end, I think it clearly is incompatible with any sort of genuine Christian faith. And a lot of these people, again, this was a point I think that Tucker Carlson made. He actually apologized for condemning Christian Zionists because he said, okay, I condemn Christian Zionism, but I know Christian Zionists, and some of these people are really good people. They're very good-hearted. They've just been misled. And so it's the question is like, when deep down, are you actually a Christian or are you a Zionist? You can't really be both. And some people think that they're compatible, but at some point they'll discover that they're not. Some of those people will go on and become some sort of, will just remain fanatical Zionists because that's what really attracted them to it. They actually like the killing. And unfortunately, I think I see that among some individuals when you hear some of these people talk. I think they actually revel in the military power and, and the violence that the IDF wreaks on its opponents. But others are, deep down, they really are Christians. They take their faith seriously. And when they discover what's going on, I would think that they would reject it if they actually see, if their eyes are open to it. So we'll see, but that's going to have huge repercussions if there is a major break within the evangelical community. Because that has been, I don't think it's really the most important pillar for Zionism in this country, but it has been one of the pillars of Zionism. And if, that falls or that splits in half, that again greatly weakens the Zionist hold on this country, or significantly weakens it.
Right. You're talking about how some of these, how they talk and celebrate what the IDF does. And it just made me think, this type of speech that we're seeing publicly we've seen it from Israeli officials, we know, but within our own representatives, our own congressmen, the way they talk, like Lindsey Graham saying, we kill all the right people, Randy Fine saying, kill them all, hashtag bombs away, showing a picture of a dead baby in the rubble and says, I feel great. Thanks for the pic. Let the streets of Gaza run with blood. That type of language. Did we see, has any modern country other than Israel, we know, is speak that way in past wars in the 20th century? Did the Nazis, like when Hitler gave speeches, was he saying stuff, kill them all, we kill, or Paul saying, yeah, we kill all the right people, and everyone's applauding, let the streets run with blood? Like, this type of language is so damning, so horrific.
Right. Well, I'm sure I think you may find some of it. But in general, to my knowledge, that's not the kind of language that Hitler used. I mean, the Nazis certainly used dehumanizing language about their opponents, Jews and Slavs. But they didn't announce, plans for genocide, or actually that was something that I guess even they understood was not going to be popular with the German people and would have international repercussions. Maybe it is. Again, this is. I'm sure you can find it, but I can't think of, not in living memory, of anything like this. Again, where you have people openly, celebrating, really obvious atrocities, and that applies to Israel too. The old Israel, did terrible things, not as terrible as what they're doing now, but they had a sense of, let's say, maybe not exactly shame, but they were aware that this kind of thing was best left in the shadows. If you could deny it, or if you could spin it, and if you actually caught, you would apologize and just say it was a bad apple. That was the approach that they used to take. But now you have all these people taking selfies and describing what they're doing, and whether it's the West Bank or Gaza, this is a constant thing. And then you have leaders within Israel that, including Netanyahu himself, openly talking about genocide. This is a difference. It's a real change.